happened? I know. Good girl, Penn. So Penny's in here, which is fine. She's a good girl. We just gotta wait a second for her to get settled. Hello. Penny, you're gonna have to lay down, otherwise you're gonna get taken out of here. I don't even know why I'm talking to her, because she's deaf at this point, so, I mean, I'm not even exaggerating, she's completely deaf, so that's fun. Hello, and welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome to Cabaret and True Crime if you're new. I'm Jana. My dog Penny is in here with us today. Not sure why. No specific reason. Just decided she could be in here with us, and let's see if that was a bad idea or a good idea. I don't know yet. I just love looking at her, and so she can stay. That's fine. I have it's a Google map that I got from somebody off of Reddit, and it is a list of all the unsolved female homicides in the United States. And it's definitely not all of them, because I think it's just like the landlocked United States, so I didn't see any in Alaska or Hawaii. If you want to find those, you're gonna have to pick a different map, a map that I don't have. Looking at this map, I happened to notice that my hometown, literally a mile and a half away from where I was born before I graced this earth almost 31 years ago, there was a murder that happened less than a mile away, or almost a mile away from the hospital I was born in, and I never even heard about it. The article that I got pretty much all of my information off of, and really there is only one article, the rest of it I found from context clues that I know from being from this area of town. I got the rest from findamemorial or findagrave.com, and then one single article that came out in 2006, which was, I was still in high school at the time, but I definitely don't remember this happening. Also, if you like my shirt, shout out to Crackers and Milk on Instagram. She has a store. She's so beautiful and so nice, and she always sends really high quality product. I have at least 5 shirts from that website, and so I highly recommend it. They're soft, they're so comfy, they're so nice, and they're all about true crime. So back to this case. There's not a whole lot. Although it is still technically an open investigation, I do find it surprising that a lot of information wasn't available, but also there is a concerning amount of information available in this newspaper article. And the stuff these people say, and you're going to be shocked, believe me, I was shocked. She's asleep now. The amount of information you can get out of this one public small town newspaper article is the reason why I love being from a small town. So I've taken this one article and inserted a couple of context clues because they are definitely necessary for understanding this. And I definitely put it in a way that makes it a little bit more straightforward, because as an Ohioan and as someone from a small town in Ohio, I definitely noticed that we like to jump right into things assuming you know what we're... We like to jump right into things assuming you know exactly what we're talking about. And I, since have moved to a larger city, have noticed that that is something that we absolutely do all the time. So this article, and I will link it down below, is definitely quite a mess. And as always, Reddit saw it first. I will link my Reddit post down below if you'd like to join the conversation. Because this article is a little bit of a mess, I thought it was beneficial to go through and tell you exactly who everybody is now, and I'll remind you later, but to get it all out of the way right up front, because otherwise you're going to get really confused. So, Anita Pratt was the woman who was killed. She was 22 years old. She was also 7 months pregnant at the time of her death. Lawrence Tree Pratt, Tree being a nickname, was married to Anita and the father of her 2 children. They had their son named Jeremy. He was 13 months old. He's the son of Anita and Lawrence. Next into the picture is a woman named Darlene Vaughn. She is Anita and William's sister. You've got, well, and the newspaper article switched about halfway through. Her name is either Gladys or Ruby, so I call her Gladys Ruby. She's married to this man called Bill, and then her sister's name is Linda. I hope that made sense. With the connections of people is very confusing, and the newspaper article is also, it was incredibly confusing. I had to go into people's obituaries of some of these people who have passed away since this crime happened to figure out how they were related to each other, because the newspaper article did shit and did not tell you anything. So, have that. And like I said, the article I'm citing and talking about was written in 2006. It was actually published on the 25th anniversary of Anita's death. I don't think there have been updates on the case since this article has been written, and even then it was described as cold but open. And I don't think anything else has occurred since this article was written. So everything that I'm talking about, I'm pretty sure, is up to date. So here's what I know. On September 19th, 1981, Linda Hugert got a phone call at 6 a.m. It was never explicitly stated, but from context clues, the call was from a man named Bill Coley. So remind you, this is Anita's stepdad. And Linda was Anita's aunt. He stated on the phone call, "Anita's gone. She's dead. She's dead." Linda was married at the time to a Jefferson Village police officer. Jefferson is a small village in Ashtabula County, and I would estimate, depending on where you're at in Ashtabula, maybe like a 15-minute drive. So they're not like super far apart. Linda asked her husband to verify the information through the Ashtabula County Police. Something that I found odd, because why wouldn't she believe Bill when he called? But also, no, I just think that's weird. If your brother-in-law calls to say that Anita's dead, the first instinct that you would have would be to call your husband to have him check with the county police to verify that. That just seemed like a weird step to me. Unsure. Bill Coley, Anita's stepdad, lived in the same apartment as Anita across the hallway. So the one-bedroom apartment that Ruby Gladys and Bill Coley lived in was directly across the hall from Anita's apartment. And so the term apartment building gets thrown around a lot, and then other times they switch to the word house. This building, whether it was a house or apartment building, has since been destroyed. I personally don't know what it looked like in the 80s, but it had multiple families living in it, is what I've gathered. So I don't know if it was like a duplex. Well, it couldn't have been a duplex if the doors, it had a hallway, but they call it a house. It might have just been a big house, might have been an apartment building. I'm not entirely sure. I just know that it's been torn down. There you go. So right back to where we were talking about, Bill and Ruby Gladys live across the hallway from Anita's apartment. Boom. He said that he had heard Anita's son, Jeremy, reminder, he was 13 months old, crying. He saw that Anita's door was ajar and it looked like nobody had forced her way in, but he heard the son crying and he went in and saw Anita, who was deceased. Something to note that I also personally found odd was that pretty much every person I've mentioned above, aside from what appears to be William, the brother, and the husband, Tree, were all inside this crime scene while Anita's body was still there. And it's because they all described seeing it in this newspaper article. So Darlene says that Anita was butchered, she fought like hell, her fingers were cut to the bone. There wasn't a place on her body that wasn't stabbed except for her baby, which I was assuming meant Jeremy. Unclear whether it meant her unborn baby or Jeremy. Ruby Gladys said that when she had gotten to Anita's apartment, Bill was holding Jeremy, and when Linda arrived, the aunt, Ruby Gladys had the baby. And Linda, the aunt, saw Ruby Gladys check the pulse of Anita. So you've got at least 4 people all just in this crime scene that is an active crime scene. You've got, I don't know where Linda lives, right? The aunt. But at this point, you've got Darlene, which was the sister, who I don't think lived in the same building at the crime scene with the body still there. Police there? Probably not, because they wouldn't let them pass the crime scene. You've got Bill Coley, the stepdad. You've got the mom and the aunt all in this active crime scene, touching things, which with the son, that made sense. Like, I mean, I guess in some way I'll give the benefit of the doubt that it did make some kind of sense that they were there because of the son. But also, it seems like they did a lot of call it around before anybody ever decided to call the police. I mean, I guess the Linda called her husband. I don't know. That timeline seemed a little sketchy to me. Anita was found deceased next to Jeremy's crib, and she had checked her son's pulse to make sure he was okay before she herself passed away. Which is very tragic. The whole room was covered in blood based off what they described, and she had reached over to check him, and then she eventually passed away. From what it seems like in the article, the case went cold pretty quickly. It was re-examined in 2006, right before this article in the Star-Beacon was written, which is still the active newspaper. At this time, though, so in 2006, the case was re-examined by Detective Sean Ward. He worked with retired detective Robert Simons, who had actually worked on the case in the mid-1980s. So what I get the impression of happened, this case happened in 1981. This case happened in 1981, the murder. For some reason, not entirely sure, there was a break because Detective Robert Simons didn't pick up the case until 1984. And then the case wasn't picked up again until 2006. So I don't know what happened between 1981 and 1984, but then I also don't know what happened between 1984 and 2006. Sean Ward, Detective Sean Ward, who came in, said that he gave a lot of credit to Robert Simons, saying that he did an extensive amount of work on the investigation when he took it on in 1984. Simons' methodology in 1984 was to review all the original statements from each of the suspects that occurred in 1981 and then re-interviewed them all to see if there were any changes in their statements. He searched for discrepancies in their story but didn't find any at all. All their stories were identical to the first time they talked about it. And all the suspects were cooperative and eager to assist, but one person particularly stood out, and that was Bill Cawley, the stepdad. According to detectives, he was always too cooperative. Simons always felt that Cawley was feeding detectives useless information, and it appeared he was trying to distract them from actual clues and evidence. Simons asked Cawley to be hypnotized for more information, and he outright refused to do that. Cawley did offer a good piece of advice that a magnet should be dropped down the air vents of the apartment building or house or whatever it was to see if they would find the missing murder weapon that way. Which they thought was quite interesting, because how did he know that the murder weapon was missing, and how would he have known that it could possibly be in the vents? But that was an interesting note, that he was being overly cooperative and he was giving them information. He was one of those people who seemed way too into the investigation, but for what appeared to be nefarious reasons. Like, it wasn't like he just wanted them to find the person who killed his stepdaughter. He was just way too interested in the case. Like I said earlier, the apartment housing had been demolished sometime between Simons' investigation and in 2006. He never knew if there was a knife in the ductwork or not. Simons, off of gut instinct, always thought Bill Cawley committed the crime. Bill Cawley's own children also suspected him. Children or stepchildren, I'm not sure the line. I don't know if they had their own children, but Bill Cawley's children, because, stepchildren are still children, saying they suspected him, saying that he drank too much and he had a pretty gnarly temper when he was drinking. Which, once again, at this point, I'm thinking, that's all pretty insane that they just typed that up and put that in a local newspaper, right? Like, they're just airing everybody's dirty laundry out in the open. Kind of fucking crazy. William Cawley died in 1993 at the age of 73. However, right up until his death, he has a criminal record. He had a domestic violence charge in 1979, felonious assault in 1983, and a breaking and entering in 1990. And this man was breaking and entering at 70 years old. It's actually kind of impressive, right? Like, don't do it, but also it's kind of impressive. Darlene commented to police that before Anita's murder, that Bill Cawley had told her, he could kill my husband right before my eyes and make me believe it was the right thing to do. Darlene also informed police that Anita told her that Bill had sharpened all the knives in her apartment just before she was murdered. Even at 60 years old, at the time of the crime, Robert Simons believed that Bill Cawley had the physical superiority to commit the crime and possibly the passion. if he tried to take advantage of Anita and was rejected, say. The timeline for Anita's murder is really interesting. The article says that she came home around 4:30 in the morning from a night out, and Bill Coley made the call about her murder at 6 a.m. Coley's story again, so at this point, I mean, before now, after Darlene comes in and tells police or the newspapers or whoever this information, police are pretty interested in Bill Coley, and for a rightful reason, right? He kind of oozes suspicion. Also, Coley's story, again, was that he heard Jeremy crying, and that's what alerted him to something amiss in the apartment building. According to other people in that building, though, Coley was extra sensitive to any noises and had been known to complain to housing management if somebody so much as sneezed too loud. Knowing that Anita fought as hard as she did, it definitely would have been louder than a sneeze, right? I mean, if she put up as much of a fight as her body said she did, there's no way she was quiet about it. And there's no way that he would have just been woken up by Jeremy crying. He would have heard the whole thing. If he was as sensitive as what they say he was, he would have heard all of it, you'd assume. Gladys Ruby suffered with emphysema and other health issues, and she was known to partake in sleeping pills and a good deal of pain medication. So it's really no surprise she didn't hear anything. But also she probably wouldn't have noticed her husband leaving bed in the middle of the night, if you know what I'm saying. The family's behavior after the crime is notable too, in two very separate aspects, right? So after the murder happened, William Sweeney, who was Anita's brother, was in the army. He was serving in Korea at the time of her murder. He made it home just in time for the funeral. He was able to get out and come home. He showed up, I think, the day of the funeral. And after his bereavement period was over, he attempted to go back to the army, but instead decided he needed to try to find his sister's killer. He moved into the apartment building where Anita was murdered. I don't know where at in the apartment building. But Bill and Gladys Ruby moved into Anita's old apartment and put their bed in the spot that Anita was murdered in. Which is weird. I don't care who you are. That's kind of bizarre, right? I tried to think of not weird reasons to do that, like wholesome reasons why somebody would want to do that, and like even the wholesome reasons is still kind of like, you know, it feels weird to me. But I guess that's my own personal opinion. It feels weird to me. Darlene said that her mother and Bill never talked about the murder with the family. Bill had died in 1993, like I said earlier. Gladys and Ruby died in 1990. If police suspected Bill of committing the crime, nothing ever came from it. And I thought it was personally weird if William Sweeney made it his life goal to find his sister's killer, right? Did he ever suspect Bill? Maybe. I don't know. You know, it's kind of interesting that it seems... Maybe they had a good reason not to suspect him. I don't know. I think the whole thing seems pretty suspicious, and I think I know who I would want to look into more on this case. And I had made a comment later on that there was probably no DNA evidence left at the scene, at least that I know of, and prints would have been probably useless. The crime scene was basically ruined right off the rip. So if it wasn't somebody in the family and people were like covering for the incident, right? I don't think they would have ever been able to find. I get the fact that Jeremy was there and that Jeremy was unharmed. I get that aspect, that they wanted to get the baby out of the situation and into safety and, you know, handle that situation. But at the same time, that's a lot of people to be messing around in a crime scene. And if you were concerned about, like, so say, for instance, somebody that I knew were killed, I would tell everybody to stay the hell out of that crime scene because you're messing it up, right? You might seem like you're helping, but you're making the job of the detective way more difficult because you're moving things around, you're adjusting things, you're leaving your footprints in blood, you're leaving your fingerprints on things. So it's like the more people you have in there might seem like a good idea, but also you're just making it harder for detectives to solve things. So you might have found the killer's fingerprints in the scene, but you wouldn't even know if you had it or not. And plus, if it was everybody who was there after the fact, So if Bill Cawley did commit the crime, his fingerprints would be in the scene regardless, because he was the first person holding the baby, you know? So you would never be able to tell if it was or wasn't. From the article, and I quote this directly, and I will quote this directly for you. Simons admits, however, that the other detectives and patrolmen close to the case felt the crime was the work of a jilted lover or jealous girlfriend. Police say that Anita was part of a network of young men and women with complex and intertwined relationships, often driven by passion rather than a commitment. The list of suspects included both males and females who could have, because of those passions, had a reason for killing Anita. The family didn't believe that, because they said that she and Tree were committed to one another and that they wouldn't be jealous, and nobody ever suspected Tree of the crime. So I don't know. I would, if it was that convoluted, I don't know if they would ever find the killer. Anita's family actually suspected that the crime was ignored or not taken as seriously because her relationship was interracial. So, to quote one of the family members directly, back then, it was like this girl was going with a black person, so she ain't worth expletive. They didn't do anything because she was married to a black man. I think the police shrugged her off. They shrugged her off because they didn't think she was worth anything. Ward, Simons, and the police captain disagreed. They all said that the PD was aggressively working on the case and checked out all possible suspects, all of whom were cleared using the best available technology at the time. Based off of everything that I've heard about the case, I don't know how they were going to solve it. They definitely were not set up for success on this one. Also to be noted that the area that this crime happened in definitely isn't the best area out there. Definitely not the worst either. Believe me, I've seen East Cleveland, but it's not a super awesome, like, wealthy, upstanding area. It's just not. It's in downtown Ashtabula, like, you know. So but I also don't think personally that is the reason why this case didn't get solved. I just think they were set up to fail in this one because of just all the circumstances. Sadly enough, Anita had always said that if the baby she was pregnant with was a girl, she wanted to name it Jennifer, so that is the name they put on the headstone with hers. Lawrence Tree Pratt was never a suspect in the killing by the family or by the police. He went on to raise Jeremy on his own and never remarried, at least by the time of the article. I couldn't find if that was still the case or not. Quite frankly, I'm not sure why this case is unsolved particularly. I don't know if there's like one good reason why. I mean, normally this is the part where I would list down a whole slew of reasons as to why I don't think this case was solved. There's, for me personally, no obvious answer as to why it's not solved. I do have a couple of questions that have come through discussing with other people and during my thought process after the fact of writing this. I don't know much about Anita's social life. Obviously, I wasn't there. She came home from a night out at 4:30 a.m. and 7 months pregnant. Where was Tree? Could she have brought somebody home with her and it went south? I wonder why then was Bill inserting himself into a case where he seemed like a suspect? That seemed kind of weird. I had also wanted to know, Anita was out until 4:30 a.m. At least that's what the article said, right? Was Jeremy home alone? Was there a sitter? Could the sitter have done it? Unfortunately, since this article was written, checking local obits in the newspaper, it seems that everybody associated with this case is either deceased or unwilling to talk about anything. So I think this case is just kind of where it's going to be. If the case has been cold for this long and there's still no leads at all, we could have done like an Occam's razor where the most obvious answer is probably the right one. But I do think there are some unknowns in there, right? I don't know if we'll ever know that answer, because this was also before cell phones, before CCTV, before house cameras, before, you know, it's at a time where somebody could do something like this and nobody would ever know that it happened because there would be no security cameras at least not everybody has a Ring doorbell or a security camera on the outside of their house, right? So there's way less footprints in this type of case. The three major outcomes that I could see happening here is either Bill Coley did it and he's passed away now. A random person in this group may have done it. She may have brought somebody home with her who killed her. Or the babysitter, if there was one. I'm not sure. Be interested to know what other people think on this one, because quite frankly, I'm kind of at a loss. I'm really not sure where else to go with this one. I'm also not sure how to help. But this was my own personal hometown cold case that I thought I would share with the world. And maybe somebody might know something about it, because it doesn't appear that this case has had a lot of activity in the last 15 years. So I figured I'd bring it back out, because we never lose hope in cold cases. There's always something that'll happen that'll be the thing that solves it. So maybe this could be it. Who knows? So with that, think about any other reasons why this case is cold, and maybe there could be something they could try, or maybe somebody that might come forward just thinking about the case. So with that, I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next week.